Now comes the fun portion of the program where we try to make this all make sense and come up with action items. So on your agenda, this talks about PSA team-led focus. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and address some of the issues that we've talked about over and over and over again and come to some consensus about what these action items are going to look like. What I did this last round while sitting up here was I tried to listen to the people giving their summaries, and I tried to put things in buckets. It's not easy. Stretchy buckets, or as, yes, our stretchy back pockets, as we say in the PSA team. So I may regret this, but I guess I'll start off with this one, and assuming we don't die, the rest of them will be easy. So one thing that I'm going to go with Sophia Kruszewski, if she's still in the room somewhere. Is she still here? Yeah, okay. I'm going to go after the elephant in the room. There is a concern about the standard. There is a concern about the quantitative standard. And here are the concerns that I heard. It's based on science, but is that science relevant to ag water applications? All right, so that's one of the concerns. Is the way the MWQP is calculated, namely over 2 to 4 years, where previous quality in years past impacts the use of the water this year? Okay, so somebody else said that. What level of public health protection does the standard provide? This came up multiple times. I think it came up the first day, second day, came up again today. And mostly, I think this goes back to the point that it's based on science, and is that science relevant for ag? So what is the actual public health quality standard that we're looking at? So with that, there were a couple of suggestions on how to solve the issue. One suggestion was to change the standard. So get rid of the standard, build a new house, I think Sophia said. That was one of the options. Another option was alternatives, come up with alternatives. Some of the feedback we heard on alternatives, some of the concerns about alternatives were, one, it's not real clear what they expect if you choose an alternative. Okay, there's a couple of pieces missing there. It might put too much pressure on growers to figure out if an alternative works and what science is good science, worrying that if you pick the wrong science and they show up and don't think it's good science, that could backfire on you. The other concern with alternatives were, and this did not get said by Sophia, but this came up in our group, so I'm going to say it anyway, which is that if nobody actually uses a standard and everybody's using an alternative, why do we have that standard? You know, so then it's kind of weird to have a standard that nobody wants to use and everybody picks an alternative. So that was brought up. Same with variances. The discussion was, what's the expectations? Variances are certainly a different level because of the petition process. So with that, my question is, what is the recommendation? What is the discussion about this? What do we want FDA to hear? What do we want to see happen? And there's a lot of options on the table here. I think the deal is that I could go through the others first, but all of them seem to hinge on this elephant, if you will, or this pivot point. Not all of them. The education materials one doesn't really pivot on this. But what's the feeling in the group? As a group, what's the feeling? Do you want to do a show of hands? How many people think the standard actually needs to change? Somebody want to count that in my team, since I can't count because I can't see that far in the back of the room? Let her finish. Keep your hands up, people. We can't count that fast. And I can't see the back of the room, so I mean, I can see, but I can't really see. I have 30. 30. Okay. They're raising hands remotely. They're raising hands remotely. All right. For the reasons that you think it needs to change, I went through some of the reasons I heard. Is there any reason it needs to change that I did not express? Okay, in the back there. Can we get a...
I have concerns, we didn't get to answer very many questions after last speaker, about the 4-day die-off. I am very concerned that if that is accepted as a standard, that the right situation is going to align and someone is going to get sick because a farmer followed the law. And I think the ramifications of that aren't enough for us to look at this and say this was our best. Because I think this house that we're building together needs to be our best. And if there's still that opportunity for that alignment, I can't look at somebody in the eye and say that it is.
Okay. Okay, that's one I did not have on my list. I had die-off somewhere else. I didn't have it on this list. Good one. What else? Phil, you had your hand up. Did you? You got to talk into a microphone, dude.
I just was going to say that St. Paul dominant vote is that the standard needs to change. That's all.
Okay. St. Paul is voting with their parkas on and their comfort llamas. Huh?
Is it the St. Paul or the city of St. Paul?
City of St. Paul. Oh, the St. I totally missed that. I totally missed that. Right over the top of my head. I was like, what other St. Paul would there be? Yes, the city of St. Paul. Divine inspiration would be really handy right now. I'd go for that. That would solve a lot of problems. Anybody else? Is there any other reason that I didn't list that you think it should change? Anybody?
Does the current testing that's already being done, is that part of like the exclusion from the rule for the folks that are already doing all the work and putting it in, and then that stuff not being included, they got to start over? So would that be part of being built into the rule that you want to start historical data, but you've got all this historical data, so why not use it?
So maybe better clarity about...
Use a mic, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I totally deserve that. I totally deserve that. And kudos to you for being quick on your feet. Okay, no, I absolutely think that we're going to harass Donna while she's trying to read my writing. But, okay. Yeah, I think the issue of historical data and its value, if it, it's not clearly enough spelled out, I think is the concern. We've heard that multiple times. That's one of the reasons she thinks is that it doesn't take into account the vast amount of data that's out there. Especially from growers.
I would say another reason is that it doesn't allow the flexibility to incorporate future science and new information on what might actually improve the standard. I mean, we just heard from EPA this morning that they reevaluate this every 5 years, and right now there's not the flexibility to incorporate that new information that we learn.
Okay. And it doesn't have the flexibility, also doesn't require I think with the EPA, they're required to periodically, they're not required to incorporate new science, they're required to periodically evaluate it, which I think those are two things, but both very valid. Okay.
Oh, sorry. There's a request to detail the reasons it shouldn't change.
Yes, we'll get to that.
Oh, we will? Okay,
we will
perfect.
get to that. Yeah, that's next.
I think they said they were
That's-
thinking all the reasons where it should change.
Oh, no. We're doing this first. We did the 30 people who said it should, and then we're going to go to the peeps that said it shouldn't. Yeah.
I'm confused about what we're talking about because you said does the standard need to change, and it seems like we're talking about the rule. So are we talking about recreational water standard that you want to throw that, or you're saying that the rule needs to change?
The rule, okay, the EPA recreational water standard was the basis, but that got pulled into the rule.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're talking about is that standard within the PSR. Does the standard itself, that quantitative standard, need to change? Is that not clear?
I'm slow. I'm getting there. Yeah. Just give me a minute. Yeah. Okay. So it's not just the rec standard. It's the context that the rec standard is into.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Just want to know what you're talking about.
That's all right. Phil.
Ames, Iowa would like to add, don't change the rule unless there is something truly better. The standard, unless there's something truly
We're going to
better.
get to you, dude.
To the remote sites.
All right. Anything else that we have not captured? Connie's got some in the back. A concern about the standard as it is.
Yeah, so this comes from Washington. They want to know that if a farmer demonstrates they're FSMA compliant under this current standard, is that going to protect them if there's an outbreak?
Oh, yeah. We have at least one lawyer in here. That's a great question. I am not a legal person. My understanding, well, I'm not even going to say that. I'm not a legal person. That's Question duly noted. Okay. We got one.
Just to make sure, I tried to listen very hard, but I might have missed it. Did you mention the reason that one of the reasons would be to shift, broken record here, to not having that hard quantitative bright line, but to a more semi-quantitative approach to facilitate and use the reason to use all that historical data, despite the limitations, stick with the current indicator as the most practical and reasonable one, but move the standard to not use that same quantitative approach.
So I think maybe how we could summarize it is that it's currently too rigid to allow for qualitative aspects to be used to meet the same level. It's too rigid to allow some of that differences, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? More or less? Okay. We're going to go with more or less. Okay, we got one there. Donna, are you doing okay? Okay.
I know that the FDA opened up additional testing methodologies in order to make it easier for growers. So they allowed Collier to come in there, for instance. But I really draw issue with having a hard standard like 126 if we're going to allow an MPN that has wide confidence intervals around it, where there's the possibility that you're in compliance, but there's also the possibility that you're not. So if 126 is meaningful, allowing for a test that has confidence intervals around it seems odd.
Okay. So if you can, Donna, couch that under, are the testing methods good enough or consistent enough to assure that they're actually meeting the standard? Is that a good way of saying it? I'm trying to, testing methods.
Michelle has something to add.
Yeah.
Yep. Are you ready,
Uh,
writers?
I think Donna's hand's going to fall off, but go
Okay.
ahead. Okay, good.
So this one has to do with enforceability. Right now, when it's in the codified language, it's enforceable. If it's not, if it's just in guidance, you can't enforce it. And so I think because there are questions around what enforcement might look like and what consequences of not meeting these standards are, the question says perhaps it needs to go into interim guidance until appropriate science for all ag water across all regions is generated.
Okay. So that's a regional concern about the quality and then also an enforcement concern. So there's two bullets that go up with that. Oh, she's got it. Good luck combining these two when we're done. Anything else? Yeah.
If I got this correctly,
Yeah.
Melissa's comment.
Wait, you need a mic.
You can read it.
Are current testing methods adequate regarding confidence intervals and rule criteria? Sure. Good job, Donna. All right, anything else? This is for the group, the 30 folks that said we should get rid of it. These are the reasons why we're concerned. Anything else? All right, for the group that thought we should keep it, why are the reasons we should keep it? Oh, well, how many people think we should keep? That's a good point. I just assumed the opposite, and I should not have made that assumption. How many people think we should keep it? Hands in the air. Way up high, peeps. Way up high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14. Wow. Okay, our next group is abstainers. Okay, you 14ers, why should we keep it? Oh, there we go. Oh, Lloyd. Oh, it should be on, unless it died.
You shouldn't tear a house down before you have a better house to move your furniture into.
This house analogy has really got legs. Or should I say rafters? I don't know. What else? I think that was sort of what Michelle was saying, but or Phil. Anybody? What else? Oh, hang on. There we go.
So one thing is, well, actually a couple things. One thing is there's a huge cross-section of industry across the country that's already, performing under this standard. Or something, very similar to this standard, right? And that upsets the apple cart for, for a huge, like I said, cross-section of the industry. The other thing, just in this is a personal opinion, not a Western grower's opinion, I think that, moving to something else, or moving these to guidance may create a lot of flexibility, but it also creates a lot of confusion and uncertainty. And in 20 years of kind of working with folks, one of the things I hear consistently from growers is, just tell me the mark, that I need to hit, and I'll be able to do it, right? And so we work, to try to find, ways to help them accomplish those goals and to, educate and to, try to promote how to comply with these things. But it's problematic for them if they don't actually know where the bright line is, right? So a bright line is important, I think. And I would have raised my hand, yes, the standard needs to be changed. But I didn't. I raised it, leave it the same, because I think there's a difference here in the argument between short-term and long-term, right? In the short term, I think you go with what you have, as imperfect as it is, because it's, something that provides stability, predictability, and certainty. And then you write the rule in such a way that it does get reviewed in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is that takes us to be, more certain about the relevance of ag water and those bright lines to, the potential for illness, down the road kind of a thing.
Okay. Thank you, Hank. All right. Go. Yep.
I didn't vote either way. I'm your abstainer. And I just want to say it's because it's a meld of both of what you're saying. Like, I think it was directed my question. The rec water standard, to echo from a grower's perspective, as the grower in me loves it because it's a number, and I want to see that. I want to see what I'm supposed to be doing. From a science and a land use, because I consider myself a soil scientist because it's kind of what I do for a living. And, from a land use, water use, I want a systems approach. And so I don't want to be told that, like, if I hit a spike that goes beyond this rec water thing, but I didn't think I was hearing that in the rule. And so everything that people are talking about that needs to change, on the change side, seems like it needs to change, but I don't understand why we have to remove the rec water standard out of that, because as a grower, you know, don't give me a moving target. Like I can't do it. I can't think I got, because this is only one thing on my list. You guys got to remember that. Like you guys are all here doing this is what you're doing. Like I'm doing 12 other things like on my phone while I'm doing this, you know, like, and so like I just need one thing, write it down, tell me what to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
the consensus I'm seeing from the folks in the South who either did not vote to tear the house down or abstained very much follows the points already made. Give us a target and we'll meet it. And it's a huge point of frustration. I think they might also be saying that doesn't mean we can't readdress it. And maybe instead of tearing it down right now, we add language around readdressing it on a regular basis and on a regional level. The other thing is just because they agree with those numbers doesn't mean they agree with the testing to get those numbers. 'Cause that was not, your question was not related to, do you agree with this 126, do you agree with 126.410? And I think the consensus that I'm getting, at least from the for not tearing it down, is we agree with the 126.410. We maybe don't agree with the sampling strategy to get us to 126.410.
Okay, so I think does that go on the don't like it or keep it? I'm not sure which list.
So your question only asked about the standard. It didn't ask about how you
but-
test to get to the standard.
Yeah, but that's fair. I'm just not sure in my organizational brain. Do we put that comment on?
It's a new bucket.
It's a new bucket.
No, I think it's a 4, right? It's for that numerical standard that gets readdressed.
Okay.
But it's maybe, I don't think that 20 samples over 2 to 4 years is the right way to get there. I don't think that the water samples I took 4 years ago really matter this year.
Okay. So I think we did capture that on the first list. But I think what we're sort of hearing is, and this is for FDA specifically, since you're going to have to get up and talk about this, I think what people are hearing on the people that want to keep the rule, I'm sensing this, yeah, keep it for now, but these are big issues related to, as Hank said, maybe you'll find something new, as Michelle just said from her group. Testing to get to that standard is a concern in the way it's currently outlined. Does anybody have a mic for Hank?
So I just want to second what was just said, right? I mean, what I was talking about were the actual numeric criteria, right? I don't necessarily agree that, 20 samples, those types of things don't need to change more immediately, right? I think there are different ways to do this. And one of the things that's been underscored, routinely over the course of the last 2 days really has been the use of historical data and those types of things. I mean, there's millions of dollars of testing that have already gone, the last decade on industry's behalf, right? There's a volume of information about water quality that shouldn't just be discarded, right? We should be able to use that to qualify water sources today.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, do you want to say anything? Yeah, because I heard your voice. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to echo what Michelle said. When you say keep the standard, a lot of people go to the 126. But even if you agree with the 126, you don't agree with the 20, you don't agree with the 5.
Okay.
And then there may be other criteria that can influence that frequency of testing or that need to test. But there needs to be some real clarity around this historical data. A lot of times they say, yeah, you can use it, but there's qualifications in to get you there that says it has to be sampled as close to harvest as possible. Therefore, there's an opportunity to exclude historical data. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't look to exclude historical data. We should look to use that historical data to understand the water source. Yep. And so don't look to exclude it because it wasn't sampled within 30 days of the date of harvest.
Right.
Okay.
So I think how we're gonna go after including that, it's not only the testing frequency and over the years of the testing and that in terms of historical data use.
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. We got here. You can go ahead. We'll let Lloyd go and then we'll let Chana go.
We've actually got 4 people in line, so I'm trying to get
go ahead, Lloyd.
direct follow-on.
Yeah.
I'll try to make this short, but I probably made it a little too short the first time. Actually, growers need a number, especially the smaller growers I work, they need a number they can get their hands around. Growers are not capable of scientifically establishing their own criteria. So, and I was talking about the 126.410. The amount of testing to get there, I would like to see it different, but does it mean we need to rewrite the rule? How to arrive there, I don't know.
Thank you for that clarification. Next, sorry, Don, I will not hand my mic over again.
Yeah, I agree with Hank and the others that the grower back here, I think you hit the nail on the head, knowing what that bright line is. But you know, another consideration is beyond the historical data, thousands of data points. You know, the buyers weigh in on things like this. And if you don't have a standard, you might be small, but if you're selling to retailers and things, I can guarantee you they're going to want to know what your water quality is. And so if you throw that out and wait till something comes along, it's not going to be good.
That's a good point. That's in my notes later, but in a different way, so that was really good. You have to get on his list. I get in trouble. Okay.
Hi, I think the produce rule got most of it right. I think there's two big issues. One, the ag water issue that we're here talking about, and two, the ownership thing. Hopefully we're gonna do something about that, but I had to say it, man, because I think it's even worse than the ag water situation. But as far as the ag water, the majority of it is fine except the ag water. I think that should have a separate, its own guidance document and give some of the ideas and suggestions. One, I understand the liking of a number. I also see where Trevor comes from a more of a quantitative instead of, or a qualitative instead of a quantitative type of thing. But you do want some kind of numbers. In the guidance, give us some type of examples for alternatives that would be okay. Variances have to go and get approved. Alternatives the grower can do themselves with help of people. And also with some of the other ideas that we've heard here this weekend, or this, for the last 2 days, about what we can do. But I think the majority of the produce rule is good. Almost everything in there we're doing already, except for the ownership thing and the ag water rule. We just need some more specific guidance on the ag water that can really help the grower determine what he needs to do and to allow for different situations.
Okay.
Are you guys done writing?
He needs to go. Yeah, we're done writing. He needs on the list.
He's next. So,
This gentleman in the front.
so question, do we have a good understanding or idea of the numbers or the percentage of growers that we don't think will be able to meet the 126.410 values?
I don't know.
Is it, I have no concept of what percentage and what areas and who are the most concerned with that and would not be able to meet that. And if that's a huge percentage of the proportion of industry, that drives one decision. If it's a small percentage, maybe you work with them to develop some variances and some differences. But I have no concept right now, and I'm not sure if FDA does or if you guys do during trainings.
I don't. Does anybody have an idea of how many growers wouldn't meet it?
Sonia says she might have something.
I don't have an answer, actually, just follow up that. Because when I got that question, I have asked that question to some growers. They have concerns about not meeting the standard. My question is, how do you know? And they haven't even conducted testing. So there's a lack of information, and maybe having a reference, going back to the reason why we should keep a reference or a standard, is collecting some of the data, in addition to what the research that has been done is doing in some areas. There's a lack of information. I don't know if no one has really an answer for that.
Yeah, and if I could just take a little bit of a zigzag from there to there across the aisle, the rule itself, we know what percentage of growers roughly are going to be covered under the rule. There's a huge portion of growers that are not covered under that rule, but they're still going to have to sell into markets that are going to demand something of them. So subject to the rule or not subject to the rule, the market's going to continue to drive it. And this being in here drives that standard to some. So the answer is I don't know, but I think we need to consider that there are growers maybe not subject legally to it, that by default will be subject to it.
This one's same thread.
Same thread, okay.
So we have about 500 farms over varying types of geography, and the majority of our growers can do it. And I would think with my educated guess that the majority of the farmers are going to be able to meet, not everybody, but I'd say at least, this is my guess, 80% would be able to do that.
Okay.
Is Hank on the same thread?
No, what?
Well, do you want to cut this thread off, or do you want to?
Okay.
It's really quick and probably not that additive, but I'll just tell you from practical experience, when we were selling the concept of the LGMA in California, every Californian grower said, there's no way we're going to meet that 126 standard, and yet everybody's doing it today.
Okay. So let's skip to Mike.
Well,
Yeah, just give it a second. You're okay.
oh, yeah. Is it working? Okay, yeah. Another one of the things that we get asked a lot about is, well, the 126.410 standard under the recreational water use triggers very specific activities, whereas for agricultural water use, it doesn't. You know, you're testing more frequently for agricultural water, and if you get outliers, you must do this, you must treat, you must close the beach, and so on and so on and so on. But you know, since we're not testing as frequently on farms, when you do get an outlier, it's not like the pro safety rule dictates that you must take these activities if you get an outlier. Other than you know, the vagues are like, take a look at your water source, find out if there's something causing it. You know, it could be your equipment, your delivery system. You know, you might need to do this, you might need to do that, but there are no specific triggers. So I mean, using something that was designed to force activities and to apply to something that doesn't enforce an activity, you know, that's where we're getting a lot of problems with some of the growers when we tell them about the 126.410 and what does that water quality profile mean to them, and how they're supposed to, how this is a useful tool for them.
So this comment isn't necessarily a pro and a con, but one of the selling problems is it's not clear how to address the issue if you're outside of it. Is that kind of? Well, sorry.
Other than it may be a requirement for buyers, other than if the buyer tells like you must have that, then they can understand that. But if they don't have a buyer that's demanding this, then why is it important to them?
All right. Is Elizabeth up?
So I have a question from Maryland. If we keep the standard as is FDA saying that acceptable public health risk is the same for rec water and produce?
Is your assumption that by taking the EPA recreational water standard, is that accepting the 32 or 34 illnesses per 1,000 people as the public health risk?
So as we identified in that memo in 2014, the public health burden falls between that 36 per 1,000 and 1 in 10 to the 6th. And so we're not necessarily directly taking that public health burden as from recreational water because we incorporate those other corrective measures. And it's not, you have to take an action after looking at the profile of 126 and 410. But you have that flexibility built in at the end after you have those numbers, and you can make a management decision based on the outcomes of those calculations.
Okay, so if people were, because I think this is going to be a follow-up, if people are to do the science to prove the public health safety, they got to get better than that 32 or 34, but not necessarily as low as the other, right? Because if scientists have to start proving it is meeting the same public health standard, right, you can't go outside the limit.
I would think that would make sense, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, can I add?
Shauna? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I add one thing on that?
Yeah.
But I think, like as Samir was saying this morning, that's part of the flexibility that we included in that guidance. That if there is, a different way to show same level of public health protection, then that's something that we're willing to look at.
Okay.
So that's saying that our acceptable risk level for produce is that number, 36 and and 1,000.
Well, it's between that and the other. So if it's between that and the other, that is the high end.
That's the lower bound.
That's the high end.
The high
or low,
bound.
whatever, yeah.
That's your target. That's what, as an industry, you've decided is your acceptable.
Not as an industry.
As a regulator, you've decided that that's your acceptable limit.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's okay for recreating.
Which is a voluntary risk.
Which is a voluntary risk, Chuck says.
Well, you could argue that eating fruits and vegetables is voluntary, I guess. Huh? Okay, go ahead.
Just going off of the recreating, it's assuming that you're consuming a certain volume of water when you're swimming. I mean, not everybody also drinks water when they're swimming. So it's kind of a balance that we have to strike between the available epi data and what we don't have. So.
Yep. Okay, Chuck. Yep.
The only thing with all this risk, it's only diarrhea we're talking about.
I want a shirt that says that. It's only diarrhea.
That 3.5% negates that, almost an equal number of bathers get respiratory disease from going in there, and they do get hepatitis and other illnesses. So remember, this becomes a diarrhea standard. It doesn't take into account all the other illnesses you can potentially get.
Okay. Or that, it's a diarrhea standard. Also a quote. Yeah, as somebody said, I don't think that's a good produce marketing line. It's only diarrhea. Okay, only a group of people who have done this for 2 days can laugh at that. All right. Anything else? Okay, so here's what I think we have done is I think we have made clear reasons why the rule should go. I think we have made a clear list of reasons that if the rule stays, we have some significant concerns about its current construction, right? And then we have this other weird list. We're going to go with the abstainers. Are any of the abstainers in the audience want to add anything to why they abstained or something that has not been captured? Oh, we got an abstainer.
So I think before I determine whether things need to change or not, it'd be nice to know in black and white what the consequences are also for not meeting different various standards of the rule. So if a person is a violator, what does that mean? Is it a slap on the hand? Is there a time to get in compliance? Or is it, some sort of understanding of what non-compliance consequences are would be helpful.
Yeah, I think we captured that under the Michelle Danilick, what are the enforcement issues that come with it. I just want you to know that I believe it's captured up here under the enforcement piece. Yeah.
Keep in mind when these water rules become compliant, how many years to work through these problems when you don't even have to worry about it?
4 for the biggies.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5,
It's not
6.
going to happen tomorrow or next year or the year after that. So if you don't believe in it, you don't follow it until you have to. It seems like that's ample time to get some answers to this problem.
Okay, I'm really fighting my urge to say FDA doesn't move that fast. No offense, guys, but I think it's really important that we leave FDA today with a very clear list of concerns and things that we think, as a group who've spent 2 days talking about this, need to be addressed today. Because I agree with you, Mike, for 4 years, the big operations get a reprieve, 5 for the next, 6 for the next. But that ain't a lot of time. And I will say in one of our groups, I want to say it was you, Andre, but if I'm attributing this to you and it's not you, you can say so. One of the growers in our group said, I'm making business decisions today, and I'm investing money today. And it is not helpful that this thing keeps moving around, because my business isn't going to wait 4 years. My business isn't going to wait 5 years or 6 years. I'm making serious business decisions and investments today, and it's not very helpful that it's a wiggly target. Yeah.
I think it's important, and I know it's been discussed in some of the breakouts, but I haven't heard it yet, when Hank mentioned that there's parts of the industry that are doing some of this already, as soon as buyers in other industries get wind of what they think is coming, those requirements could be set in stone on the buyer requirement, and even if FDA hasn't said that that's the law. So I think as guidance or rules, or if things are going to change or if things aren't going to change, that's taken into account, that as soon as something's published and a buyer reads it and they're like, oh, well, because like that's where they're going to get their education or their information from.
Right.
So we could then be implicated from a buyer perspective that the FDA never really intended to happen or intended for it to happen that soon. So.
Okay. Yep.
This is a non sequitur, so I'm happy if you want to put this in a parking lot and save it for later, because this doesn't necessarily apply to the current thinking, or to the current stream of consciousness. Is the testing needs to be completed within 6 hours of collecting the sample, or is the research showing that the test results are the same when samples are tested less than 6 hours after sampling?
Oh, well, Chuck's going to answer that question for you.
There's studies that show you can go up to 24 hours. You have to realize there's 6 hours from drinking water. And also in bathing waters, they want a fast reaction time because whether should the bathers be on the beach or not. So I think we should give more leadway to a longer period of time, because it's been shown it's not really necessary in published studies.
Yeah, we shout out to Lindsay, who's sitting in Geneva. We have a research project looking at this right now, and it is 24 we're actually stretching it beyond that because growers want to ship overnight, and 24 ain't enough.
Yeah, I want to second that, as we've done a multiple replicated study right now that we're working on publishing. It shows water source dependent and holding time dependent. We're able to go out even to 5 days with very little change if it's held at 4 degrees C. What is confusing, I think, to the growers is that everybody was up in arms about method 1603 when it came out. They're like, oh, it's a 6 to 8 hour hold time. And the list that's published right now by the FDA as acceptable testing methodologies, some of them have a prescriptive hold time written in the language, other ones don't. However, bacteria don't care how it's being tested or what it is that your lab is using. Your sample is changing regardless. And I was talking to Oren about this a little bit. Depending on what background microbes are in there, if there's protists that are chomping on your E. coli or whatever, regardless of the test being used, there is a built-in hold time to your sample. And whether or not growers then decide, like, I want the lab to choose this method that doesn't list a hold time on there because I think I'm getting benefit from that, the reality is that your water changes as soon as you sample it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to propose, because we spent a lot of time on this one, but I think this was a biggie, and I think it deserved the time we spent on it. I'm going to move us to the next thing. Can we move to the next thing? Are we sort of happy with where we're at with this? We'll get to hear what FDA thinks when they stand up for their feedback. The next thing that I heard a lot of information about was farm implementation concerns. Expectation that growers have training expertise to do what needs done. This cycled around a couple of different topics. One, the sanitary survey. John Griffiths outlined the data needed to do a sanitary survey, the control you had to have over your water sources to do something about your sanitary survey. And growers were concerned about, am I prepared to actually do a sanitary survey? It came up a couple of different times. How do we do it? What kind of guidance is out there for us to do it? Costs. I could say that 8 more times. Growers are willing to follow a well-written hazard assessment materials or training guide, but people seem hesitant to develop one, again, because this is a moving target, and nobody knows what we're trying to help growers develop a target towards. So there's a conflict there. You look confused, Karen. Was I not articulate enough on that one? Wow. That'll teach you to roll up your face while I'm looking at you. Maybe I wasn't clear. Is that clear to everybody? So growers have told us time and time again, we want these educational materials. We want some educational materials to help us assess risks. We want to know what to look for. We want to know what risks are out there. The conflict that I've heard is that Extension says there aren't enough funding, we don't have enough information to know what to give you because things keep changing. Is that clear? Still not clear. Somebody give her a microphone.
I better say something, or people will wonder what I'm thinking. I just was going to say, is it the question? Those are two things, right? Do we know how to do a sanitary survey? Those of you in the room who do sanitary surveys, do we know how to do a sanitary survey? If we do, and FDA's, we're waiting for FDA to figure out how they're going to finalize the rule, those are two different things. So can we help Lloyd and the others who are asking, can you just make sure we know how to do that? I think we can do that, right?
Well, I think that is a great question, and one that I think deserves some discussion, which is, I'm almost at the back of my list, so maybe we can pause here for that. The discussion of a sanitary survey came up multiple times today. It came up prior to having a presentation on it, and it came up a lot after the presentation on it. And the question becomes, do we know how to do a sanitary survey? So I guess we could start with that. Are we prepared in the ag industry to do a sanitary survey? Michelle is dying for a microphone, and Trevor has one. So go, Trevor. Okay. And then Kristen?
Right,
Kristen, go first?
Okay.
Kristen, go first.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Is John still here? I'm trying to pick him out of the audience. Oh,
Get to leave.
okay. Well, I was going to compliment him on his presentation, so you can let him know I did that. I really enjoyed the using biotechnology to solve this problem. I thought it was intriguing. My question for him would be, how much, in thinking about replicating this on a farm environment, a farm that might have multiple water sources, what was the cost of doing that sanitary survey for those 4 beaches in thinking about replicating that in a farm environment?
Okay, so the cost of doing a sanitary survey.
Okay, at least from my perspective, and I know talked about this in the breakout group, I think it's really important to step away from calling what's needed a sanitary survey. It has a very specific definition. It has very formalized steps, criteria, as you heard from John. Unless I'm incorrect, I believe that FDA is moved towards asking growers to conduct an agricultural water system assessment. I think that is something that industry can do with help, with guidance, with additional input and how-tos and things like that. Very different level as an initial evaluation. I think that may, words matter, but I think, sanitary survey, even though it was, as Hank knows, was adopted very early on, even prior to the formalization of LGMA, as shifting that term over, but it meant something very different than what he was talking about. You may get to the point where you have to ask for help to do some sort of dye tracer, to do things in some of the outbreaks, assessment, environmental assessment, walking that watershed, identified septic leakage and washout from corrals of 4-H, whatever, that were contributing. But agricultural water system assessment is, I think, what's needed and very different than a sanitary survey.
So I agree with that, and that's kind of the point I was getting at, is that the sanitary survey is something I don't think we're capable of doing. So then the follow-up question to that is an agricultural delivery system assessment valuable in reducing risk to the point that it should be one of our mitigation steps? We got an Andre in the back.
I got Andre.
Okay.
302.
Thank you.
As a grower, what I learned here from the thing is that is a tool that I'm going to need to make for more effective testing. I mean, I don't agree with these 20 and 5 points at all, and now I don't actually even think about this as an FDA thing anymore. I think about it as like eventually it's going to just be a liability issue, and so then if it's a liability issue, I want this to be effective, and it seems like in order to make effective decisions on either when to test or when to irrigate, or when to test to have effective baselines to know when to irrigate, I should say, I'm going to need something like this. And I don't know how to do it.
Okay, so I think as a group, Kate, give it to Kate. I think as a group, what I'm hearing people say is we don't think we're prepared to do an actual sanitary survey because that's far outside, but we do think we need to do the water delivery system inspection, but we need to have very clear instructions, guidance on what that looks like to actually assess those risks. Andre, is that, am I hitting that?
Yeah, I think I came out in our group.
Okay. Kate?
I would just add that I think the depth of that assessment is also determined by your historic sampling data and whether you're, how high of a risk of a watershed you are in.
Yep.
It's going to be a different level that's necessary for a high risk area than it is where the historical data shows a relatively low risk.
Super. Oh, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't want to get hung up on sanitary survey. It's just when the gentleman was doing the presentation, that put, for me as a grower, it gave a particular format for me to sort of go out and do that assessment, that hazard analysis of the real estate around my water sources. But I'm looking at a document that FDA published in 1996, and I'm sitting next to a person that was 1998 rather, the Guide to Minimize Microbial Food Safety Hazards for Fresh Fruits and Vegetables. That is an awesome guidance document. And it has a very, like 6 bullet points on assessing your ag water that are not prescriptive, but they're guidance. They tell you how you should go out and assess these things. Condition of your well, condition of the environment around you. It's very straightforward, and that's the kind of guidance that when I'm doing a PSA training and I get the question that doesn't fall in the black letter regulation, I can go to that and say, here's an acceptable practice that's been in use for some time now that's consistent with the industry that you may or may not be feeding your food into. That's the kind of straightforward stuff I'm looking for. The bigger issue of whether or not we've got the right standard to address the minimum health risk to the public, that's above my pay grade. So I'll leave that to you scientists, but it's only diarrhea.
All right, we got one in the back. Oh, wait, sorry, go ahead.
Along the same lines as what was just said and what Kate said, I want to keep in mind that it's not only specific to the watershed, but the commodity and the way I grow it and the way I water it. And, there's all sorts of reasons and ways that I can mitigate some of these risks. And if we're smart and we're doing these surveys and doing the things that we should be doing, and we got guys out on the farm every day doing this stuff, if we train them right, we can develop a risk assessment based on a lot of different factors.
Okay. Go ahead.
Up here.
Up here.
Hank's been waiting a while.
Well, so whatever you call it, sanitary survey, environmental assessment, I think it's a critical, part of what's already in the rule, right? And so it's there. My contention associated with it is that, there needs to be some definition around the scope, right? I mean, it's impractical for growers to go and do a survey for the entire watershed, right? So maybe it's limited to the parts of the water that are under their direct control or those types of things. And then I think also there should be some value for doing the survey and for addressing, concerns that have come up in the survey. So if you mitigate risks associated with your environment, maybe you can reduce the amount of or the frequency of testing or those types of things. There needs to be a recognition and a connection, between the level of control that you have over your water system and the monitoring that you do, down the road.
Okay, and I think that really fits into the thing we talked about on keeping the rule, other things that need to be considered. Yeah.
Just echo what Hank said and the two gentlemen in the back. We call it a sanitary survey, like Hank said, but it really is an assessment of your water system. It's very straightforward. It's got things you need to look at. It's like a yes and no kind of questionnaire, but it points you in the right direction of things you need to be looking at. It's essentially not that prescriptive, but it points you in the areas you need to look and make an evaluation. So it is not a sanitary survey. When I heard the speaker this morning, I go, well, we're certainly not doing that, but we are evaluating our system and making risk assessments. So I think it's a good thing. It really is. It is an LG, you're right, it's an LGMA, and we can make that available. It's certainly as a starting point. And to your point, sir, it doesn't always fit every commodity, but then you adjust accordingly on how you grow and whatnot. So it's a template, and it could be adapted for just about any kind of an application.
Okay. Connie?
Comment coming in from online says, is it just me or is this discussion still pretty high-end with only large farms in mind? So as we make these changes, we need to think about the small to very small farms as well. And they're in the process of just starting to test their water, let alone do any of this other stuff, but keep them in mind.
No, and I think Roger certainly is not a gigundous farmer, and neither is Andre. So I think we're definitely, and you can give the microphone to Andre and to Roger, but I think they're both saying that the assessment is doable as long as they have the help to determine it. I don't want to speak for you, but yeah.
I think as far as this whole water thing, I have no clue how we're paying for it, you know, at all. So, but it seems to me what I've learned here is that picking a number of tests and saying 20 is meaningless if I don't have a context of the system. And so if the idea is to build this baseline and then have something applicable to food safety, it actually in the longer run will be cheaper to me to basically understand, so because then I'll have a mitigation plan, I'll have other plans in place. It's not about, I guess I came here thinking it was all about testing, and now I really think that testing is like secondary to the rest of this question.
Right.
So,
Did any of our other large plain growers want to speak about implementation on large farms? Okay, Roger.
Yeah, I just, going back to Samir's much ballyhooed house analogy, back to the foundation, it's right in the statute. Flexibility for small, all scales of production. And, what's going to work for Donna and her, guys that are already doing this stuff, maybe it's apples instead of oranges, but they're basically doing the same thing already. For Andre and I and a few others in here, maybe at best we're in a field pack gap. So this is going to be a learning curve. It's going to be a learning curve for some of us in certain regions. For our extension folks, also need to get up to speed on this stuff. And I know we've got a lot of great folks back up at the Northeast Center for Advancement of Food Safety and Extension up there that are actively doing research projects and trying to, lay the groundwork perhaps for our eventual alternatives and variances. So, and we're also going to need, I think we're going to need assistance through diminishing government resources, USDA and FDA, to make sure that this doesn't put us out of business, because the cost of these requirements, is a lot easier to spread out over a couple thousand acres than it is over 20 or 30. And I know we can, there can be political disagreements over that, but I figure if the feds put a rule on me that costs me money and it's not something I can monetize, I'm certified organic, I can monetize that. Minimal food safety is not a sticker I'll put on my product.
It's only diarrhea. It's only diarrhea. Go ahead, Raymond.
Okay, what I'm hearing is things from a lot of different size farms, and the small growers that I would represent in a number of different states. I don't think that the 126 and the 410 is non-achievable by most. Like I think we heard, possibly 80%. I would have guessed that to even be a tad higher with the tests that are being done. And the other thing that I see that would make food safer, in my opinion, on the small farm is exactly what Trevor was saying, a risk analysis that the farmer understands, or a delivery system assessment, whatever we want to call it. I think if we call it a sanitary survey, it will go above most of the small growers' heads.
Okay, so we got Gretchen over there.
Raymond, I should have just waited for you to clear it all up for me. And I'll reel back in everybody knows how to do a sanitary. I'm an agronomist, so I'm not a sanitary, whatever their title is. But that was the point I was trying to make, is that if we're only looking at the numbers, or we're only looking at what the standard is, or what the reg says, what the rule says, we miss the point of that critical thinking about defining your area of control, defining your sources, designing your potential pathways, and that's the critical thinking that's going to catch a hazard and actually lead to good outcomes, even if the standard isn't quite right. So I think that's what FDA's hoping to accomplish, is sort of a greater awareness. So that's going to be a culture of learning, and I can tell you for nutrient management, we really struggle when there's a hard standard people are trying to hit. They're so consumed with trying to meet the standard, I don't know if I don't know, there's too much to pay attention to there or what, but it tends to distract from exactly what Raymond just said. Help us understand what are the moving parts, which ones can we control, how do we make sure we're not missing something important. So yeah, Trevor's right, it's not a sanitary survey, but the point is, don't lose the critical thought, or you risk.
Keep the baby.
Keep the baby.
Keep the baby. Okay, we've got 3 waiting. Okay, go fast 3 waiting, because I want to do a lightning round before we break.
Okay, mine's real quick. I just wanted to reiterate that even though Nature Act Farms is a large company, we're a large company of a lot of growers, and a lot of them are small. We have a lot of farms, only 2 acres. So they're not all just 1,000-acre farms. I want to make sure you know that.
Speaking from the large farm, we're the same example. We would be considered a large farm in the 16,000 acre range, but that is made up of multiple small growers. But with that being said, a lot of the talking about the different language that we're using here, the sanitary survey or the assessment. Any farm that is currently actively involved in a GFSI benchmark audit, you already have to do an assessment on your well or your water source, and you have to do it weekly. You have to log it. You have to check it. So if you have any certification at all, you're already doing what's being said. We're just hearing some new language today for some of our growers who don't actively participate in these things. And on that, I just say thank you for hosting this for everybody in all sizes, because I think we're hearing good things from all different groups today.
I agree. Excellent meeting.
So just really quickly, I did want to compliment the FDA on this, as we're all talking about the importance of doing an assessment of your water source. They built it into the rule. You're required to do it every year because they recognize that it's a very important thing. So while we all sitting here saying, like, it seems like it's a good idea to do an assessment, well, you have to. So that's good. But one of the things talking about whether or not the extent of your assessment is just waters underneath your control, out in the West, you're an irrigation district, none of the water's technically really under control. So then how far upstream in your district are you looking? Well, there's a thing in the rule that already says that if you have knowledge of change in upstream conditions, you have to redo your water quality profile. But how far upstream do you have to look to have knowledge of that? Or can growers just like, oh, I didn't know that changed, even though you're fully aware that it changed? How do they prove knowledge that you knew something upstream changed? So I think that really needs to be clarified in terms of what is the extent that a grower actually has to have knowledge of upstream conditions, and how does that work into their annual assessment?
Okay, so where we're going now with the lightning round, and Donna's going to love me because she's not done writing, and I need you to rip that off when you're done and get a clean piece of paper. I'm going to have I promised you guys we would give FDA a short list of stuff you want fixed now. One of them was the presence, absence, harvest, post-harvest ag water. Another one that, well, I'm not sure this is short, but better coordination between FDA agencies, EPA, BLM, states is not a federal agency, but you get my point. What are some others? Raise your hand for the short list. And then Donna is going to do educational materials we want. That was the other list we said we would do. Or research. Oh, can we have three? You get research. Kristen gets research, Donna gets short list for educational materials, and I get FDA's short list. Go ahead.
For the short list,
okay.
I have to leave soon, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure and include tribal,
yep,
access to funding, and development in the investigator section.
My list is FDA short list.
For the FDA shortlist,
Uh-huh.
clarification on the FDA's intended pathway forward, in other words, through guidance or a rule change.
Okay.
To give a little bit more detail on the better coordination, I would love to see the TAN responses available to.
Oh, yeah, we'd all love to see those. Nope.
Got Elizabeth?
Okay, impact study on treatment costs.
I'm not sure that's a short list. I think that's a research.
Yep. Gaps, is it sufficient to be, we're talking about combined, over, you know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I think it's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Water
Sorry, Elizabeth.
source and upstream users. This is coming from Maryland, so I'm just reading what they've got. And if you guys want to clarify as I'm reading, please type fast. Public health risk specific to region, so regional specific research.
Okay.
We'll do Connie first.
Go, Connie.
All right, this comes from Arizona. More research and risk assessments conducted specifically, in all caps, for produce water.
Okay.
More research and risk assessments conducted specifically for produce water, rather than basing it on these other
Ag
standards.
water. They want
Ag water.
something for ag water, not just EPA. Correct. Michelle. Oh, sorry, then we'll go over there. I should go with whoever has the microphone. Go whoever has the microphone, man. We're lightning round.
Do something about the 6-hour time for getting the samples in.
Okay, 6-hour hold.
No, there's already, I think, Trevor and their fellow down here, there's already some research out about that.
I think we've got this one on the research list, but I think it also needs to go on the education short list. Options or solutions for treating contact water, and then how to show you're treating the contact water. I'm probably going to sneeze as I say this next one. Education around what risk assessment really means when you say you're doing a risk assessment.
I started calling it a hazard assessment because I got sick of fighting with risk assessment.
And also, being really careful. I think this is another educational short list. Would we say words like sanitary survey that have really specific meanings? We need to be careful not to say we're going to do those.
Right.
When that's not what we really mean.
No, I agree.
And that was, yeah.
I'm going to go back to Trevor's words matter. Come on, short list. Go, Jonas.
Clarification on the edible portion of the fruit.
Do you mean the bloom issue? Clarification on the bloom issue?
If they bloom.
Clarification on when edible portion starts.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Thanks.
Sorry, harvestable.
I would like to see the possibilities pursued of on-farm testing to be developed and approved.
I think that's research. On-farm testing methods. On-farm testing methods. Yep, Stuart.
For the FDA to sound like a broken record, but the path on variances,
Yep, I had
alternatives, exemptions.
Next.
We know that's not it. Ready?
Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Are we done?
Oh, I've got
Okay, go ahead.
one for research, kind of a follow-up, a path to variance, but a funding for variance to apply for, or funding to apply for variance to the water rule.
Okay. That one over there, right? Okay. What else?
I've got one.
Okay.
I think it fits over here.
Okay.
It's funding for grower education and technical assistance. Have we?
We'll put it
covered
here.
that?
I'm not sure where
Yeah,
that
and
goes.
I mean, and just to make sure really that they understand what the rule says, clarity with the rule and the variance, particularly to the variances and variability.
You mean like
options.
keeping the PSA funded?
Yes, something like that with CFSA as a partner.
That was shameless. Yeah, put it on all of them.
The research that FDA is working on.
Oh, transparency in the research. Okay.
Okay, we've got still need fundamental research for ag water, not recreational water. Is that on there already?
That was on. That was the first one.
Perfect. And then I can't find the other one. I'll come back.
Can we come back to you? Teresa?
Clearinghouse for the resources that the states are developing under the implementation.
Okay. That's Elizabeth. Done. Check. NECAFS has that underway. So if you haven't been to the NECAFS website. Connie.
All right, so there's a lot of people chiming in online about this is all great discussion, but what are we supposed to tell farmers now when they ask about water?
We're getting there.
FDA is going to clear that up in the next section.
We've got Michelle.
Okay.
All right, this one has to do, and I think this is for FDA, but maybe also for NASDA, clarity around enforcement and what an inspection will look like. And I think that is specifically targeted, what are we going to look for immediately with water when these requirements are still 4 years out?
So is that a clarity around enforcement and inspection in the meantime? Is that what that is?
I think it's both in the meantime and in general, right? There's a general concern about what that's going to look like, and there's a specific concern about what that's going to look like for water and water systems when we haven't had an implementation.
Okay, that's super. All right, are we all ready for a break? Oh, we got one. Kate, are you going to be? Oh, we got two. Here, I'll give Kate mine. Okay. We got to go on break. I know it's time for break.
Determining a pathway forward for building flexibility on sampling frequency, understanding that right now with alternatives and variances, we're just not there on being able to prove same level of health protection.
I think that is in our crankiness about the rule.
Cranky.
No, I think we covered it. She wants in the short list? Okay. Say it again, Kate. Sorry. I just don't know if that's a short list thing. So flexibility, say it again. Flexibility. Okay.
So basically determining how to build flexibility into the rule on especially sampling frequency, keeping in mind the limitations right now in using alternatives and variances with the challenges related to proving same level of health protection.
Okay.
And then I just got clarification from the peanut gallery that the last thing on the short list was break.
Break. Yes. Okay, we'll go on break. I will give you 15 minutes. We'll start 10 minutes later than we were supposed to, so that's 20 till. Thank you, guys.